Morning, fellow students, and welcome to the first SGS History Crash Course, which we have to do because IGCSE just messed up our schedule. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the contradictions of the 20th century, which was definitely a contradictory period of time. To start, the 20th century was a period full of change, especially in the global political context. It was also a very busy century, busier than the 9th grade students. But firstly, it was the First World War. It also was called the Great War, even though it had nothing about great. It lasted 4 years, from 1914 to 1918, and it marked the first contradiction. Germany was the one to blame for the war in the Treaty of Versailles under the War Guilt Clause and the Diktat or Dictated Peace. It was also condemned to lose its resources, but in fact, the first ones to mobilize military forces for war were the Russians in 1914. And talking about the Diktat, this leads us to the second contradiction that took place in the Treaty of Versailles of 1919, which was that Germany wasn't allowed to take part of the negotiation for its future, being the main subject for this discussion. That was forced to agree to all these terms. Moreover, the treaty included the idea of self-determination stated by the President Woodrow Wilson, but still it forbade the Anschluss or the union between Austria and Germany. The end of the Great War meant that America suffered from an economic slowdown for a couple of years. After all, war was great for the US. Allies bought armament from them. Their farmers cultivate more food to feed Europeans who couldn't self-sustain, etc. The war influenced an economic boom for the American economy. But in the same way, this economic boom led to a Great Depression. Honestly, what does the world have with naming catastrophes great? It's ironic that the time of prosperity paved the path for a time of poverty, vulnerability, and misery for Americans, but it did. How contradictory.
Now let's go to the SDS Thought Bubble.
Hey everyone, welcome to the bubble. In here you will find some bonuses about the 20th century contradiction. The first one you can find it within the Treaty of Versailles, which was meant to create a long and lasting peace for Europe and all the countries around the world. However, it created hatred between all Germans, including Adolf Hitler. One of the several points of the Treaty of Versailles was to create an organization that would moderate peace around all the world. It was called the League of Nations, but it didn't really work at all, as it enabled many countries to expand, such as Italy in Abyssinia and Japan in Manchuria. As I mentioned before, Hitler hated a lot the Treaty of Versailles. That is why he decided to destroy every one of the terms stated in there.
How wonderful is to write someone a letter, or recite one spontaneously.
Oh, it's time for the open letter. Let's see what we have for today. An open letter for the 20th century. Oh wow, what a surprise! But first, let's look at what we have in our secret compartment. Oh, a beer stand. I know what you're getting at. So, dear 20th century, I didn't get to know you and be enchanted by your charms or run from your tragedy. But if I was to dedicate you a song, it would be Ironic by Alanis Morissette, or was it Morissette? I really don't know. Anyway, you were a century of little inconsistencies that made you a great, gigantic discrepancy since the First World War. And we've already gone through some of your contradictions, but I want to pick out your greatest hits. So let's start with the smallest one, the Prohibition from 1919 to 1933. It was supposed to reduce the consumption of alcohol in order to bring crime rates into a fall, which it kind of did at first. For like 2 seconds, and then it made everything so much more worse because gangsters were controlling speakeasies or illegal nightclubs to go and drink, and organized crime reached a peak it had never ever been before. And then it was moonshine, which was homemade alcohol that often intoxicated people, and bootlegging to transport these illegally. People were going insane. It was a catastrophe. Prohibition made you want to cry into your beer, but denied you the beer to cry onto. Leaving that behind, the League of Nations was another living contradiction. It was supposed to be an organization to protect the well-being of nations and help them. But alas, they didn't even have a military to intervene in difficult situations. I mean, Stan, isn't that completely unbelievable? But then again, they went with the flow with everything that the Allies wanted, such as in the Ruhr incident with France and Belgium in 1923. And then they did nothing, and with nothing, I mean absolutely nothing in situations such as an invasion of Manchuria or Abyssinia, because they had a conflict of interest of what each decision could bring to their interest and personal needs. I mean, who could have gotten away with such a fierce and violent invasion such as Mussolini pretended to do in 1934? Oh wait, the Mongols did. Then there was the Cold War, which was not cold at all because there was military confrontation. And this military confrontation, this war, helped enhance movements in the US to help people and rights and workers. And meanwhile, millions of Koreans and Vietnamese people were dying. I don't know how every war ends up helping the US. You see contradictions everywhere. 20th century, I don't get you at all. But we may have to owe you an apology because we put so inaccurate names in your events. I'm really sorry. Best wishes, Natalie Soto.
2 minutes too late, and isn't it